What's going on, Chum Guzzlers? Welcome back to Bucket of Chum, the Shark Movie Podcast. As always, I'm your host, Captain Steve, and this is year 4, I believe. I believe this is our 4th year. So yeah, we're going to go down to a bi-weekly schedule for the time being, but happy February. So yeah, we're starting new episodes this month in February 2026. We're going to do bi-weekly episodes, just to give me time to catch up on other stuff and whatnot. And if things settle down, then we'll go back to a regular schedule. But for now, we're going to do a bi-weekly episode. And the first episode for 2026 is actually one of my favorite movies from 2025. And I'm checking out Dangerous Animals, directed by Sean Byrne. I actually had the opportunity to check this out in theaters, and I had an absolute blast with it. This is from the same director. He's an Australian director, and he did the cult classic The Loved Ones, which if you have not seen, I highly recommend. It is an absolutely fantastic horror movie. But this movie stars Jai Courtney. I know. Jai Courtney, a.k.a. Captain Boomerang from Suicide Squad, Jack McClane from A Good Day to Die Hard, and of course he was Kyle Reese in everybody's favorite Terminator movie, Terminator Genesis. But this movie also stars Hassie Harrison from the horror anthology Southbound. Now, I know I mentioned Jai Courtney, and listen, I never thought in a million years, after seeing all those movies that I just mentioned that were all terrible, that I would actually be excited about Jai Courtney in a movie, but he kicks ass in this. Like, let's just get that out of the way right now. Jai Courtney is amazing in this movie, and that's something I never thought that I would say. So to start off, let's get into the Letterboxd plot synopsis. You're safer in the water. A savvy and free-spirited surfer is abducted by a shark-obsessed serial killer. Held captive on his boat, she must figure out how to escape before he carries out a ritualistic feeding to the sharks below. This has an average rating of 3 stars on Letterboxd. Now, for poster expectations, I've seen this before. Like I said, I saw it in theaters. But the poster is just a wide shot of the ocean with a boat's wake in the shape of a shark fin with blood in it. It's pretty simple, but it's also really cool. I really like this poster a lot. It doesn't reveal a whole lot about what we're going to see. It doesn't really give us too much of an idea of what to expect from the movie itself. But I also did a trailer react for this on the YouTube channel, so be sure to check that out as well. And while you're over there, why not hit the like and subscribe button so that way you keep up to date on when I release new episodes or videos. And, leave a comment down below on how you think the episode is or things like that. And if you want to support the podcast even further, you can go to patreon.com/Bucket of Chum, where each month I'm doing an exclusive episode over there. Back in January, I did something a little bit different, and I did a Let's Play. So I played a game called Depth, where you either play as a shark or as a diver fighting sharks. I had a lot of fun with that. I'm going to be trying a whole lot of different things this year, so make sure you go and check that out. And if you can't do any of that, if you could just give the podcast a review or a 5-star rating wherever you listen to your podcast, all of that would be greatly appreciated. But for now, there's nothing else left to do other than to board the ship with Captain Boomerang as he terminates his victims to die hard, and let's dive in. So the movie starts off with this young couple, Heather and Greg, going to Bruce Tucker's boat, and that's Jai Courtney's character, and they're going for a cage dive. So he runs a shark cage diving tourist business sort of thing. He's a little disorganized, a little bit creepy, but we also see Bruce's neighbor on a boat with a dog, and I'm going to tell you this right now. The dog lives. Yeah, they don't kill the dog. Finally, in a fucking horror movie, they don't kill the dog off. Like, what a concept. But anyways, once on the boat, Tucker tells them the story of when he was a kid and attacked by a shark. And then we see on the wall, there's this article that says, like, I beat Jaws on it. And it's like him as a little kid after his shark attack. And then the couple go and get ready, but once Heather sees the sharks like kind of swimming around the boat and whatnot, she starts to panic. So Tucker tells them that they need to do an ancient ritual in order to get ready for this shark dive. So the 3 of them are on the deck holding hands, and then he just slowly starts to sing Baby Shark. He's like, Baby shark, do 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 do, and they just keep building it up and up until all 3 of them are singing it and just having the time of their lives. Everyone's so happy. They all laugh and sing. It's just everything's gonna be fine. Everything's going great. And then the couple are in the cage, underwater with sharks swimming around. We see a few makos and thresher sharks, and then Heather stops panicking after a minute, and she just kind of admires like the beauty of it all, and this like whimsical music playing, and all is right in the world. They return to the boat, and Heather is smiling and laughing as Tucker helps get Greg out. He stabs him a bunch of times. So, yeah, he helps Greg out of the cage, and then he just stabs him, and then Greg falls into the water. He looks to Heather and says, "Welcome aboard." She screams, and then we get our title card. I love the opening to this movie. I think it's really great. It kind of sets the tone for the entire movie. We get to just see how wild and crazy like Jai Courtney's character really is right off the bat. I think it's a great opening. And then we see our hero of the movie, Zephyr, a bikini babe catching some rogue waves. As a cover of Dancing with Myself plays over the credits and whatnot. And so after we see her surfing and whatnot, she's inside a convenience store while this other man at the counter, Moses, is asking for jumper cables, and so we ask the cashier if he has any, and then he goes to Zephyr and he's like, "Do you have any?" She's like, "Nope, sorry, not gonna help you." And so she pays for her stuff, and then when she goes outside, she empties out her big cup of like icy, like slushy thing that she bought, and it's got ice cream inside of it. So she stole it. And Moses sees us outside, and he's like, "Hey, I don't think you paid for that, and I think the cashier would really like to know that. Maybe you can just help me with some jumper cables." And she's like, "No, I'm not going to do that." And then we basically cut to them driving in her van together, and they start chit-chatting and whatnot. So, I mean, Moses basically blackmails her into driving him, but he's actually not a piece of shit. I'll tell you that right now. He's actually like a decent dude in this movie. So yeah, they banter back and forth. They get to Moses' car and she helps him boost the battery. And then she notices he has a surfboard in the back and he reveals like this little secret surfing spot. It's not really like it's a pretty wide open spot, but I think he's like, "Oh, if you go at this time of day at this spot, you get some like really good waves and whatnot." And so they finally have like a proper introduction and they become friends. They share like the same love of music. He's like listening to CCR or something like that. And this comes back up later on. It's not super important, but if you want to see all that, watch the movie. And then after that, they make love in the back of her van. They just go at it, just two hard bods, just not much in the way of nudity, but a very classy lovemaking scene. I'll say that. Not gratuitous, but still passionate. Very lovely. And then after their boner surfing, they smoke a joint, still in the back of the van, talking about life and what got Zephyr into surfing. And she's kind of a hippie, nomad, bohemian woman, very free-spirited, as the plot description says. And then Moses leaves to bake her some pancakes, but when he returns to the driveway, she's left. And she's left to go to the surfing spot that he had mentioned to her. As she's getting ready, she realizes that she's forgotten her fin key for her surfboard. So she goes to a truck and calls out for someone and says, like, "Hey, I'm not trying to steal anything. I'm just trying to look for a fin key." And so she rummages around and whatnot. And then Tucker comes out of the dark, scaring the shit out of her. But then he gives her an extra fin key that he has, very nice about it. So she takes it, and then he drives off. And then she gets a text from Moses, and they exchange like photos of their meals. He's got like these like nice stack of pancakes, and she's just eating like these fucking dinner rolls or whatever. And then he asks to join her, and she's about to say yes, and then she deletes the message, and then she's like, "Oh, it's a free ocean. You can just do whatever you want." Very like passive aggressive, like, "Oh no, I like you, but I'm not gonna let anyone get close to me because blah 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 doo." And then suddenly she's got a plastic bag over her head. So Tucker has come out of nowhere, puts the bag over her head, and then manages to make her pass out. And then he injects her with something, puts her in the back of his truck, and then he like ditches her surfboard into the ocean. And so he takes her back to his boat. He drags her body across the dock onto the boat. The neighbor's dog growls at him, but eventually she ends up in a locked room. And then we go with Moses, and he finds her van at the spot that he told her about, and he starts searching around for her, but obviously he can't find her. So he calls her, and he hears her phone ringing in the van, which really isn't that weird, because I'm like, if she's going surfing, she's probably not going to have her telephone on her. I mean, I wouldn't personally, but unless some people do that, I really don't know. I don't know why you would. I don't know why you'd risk, like, losing or, like, drowning your fucking phone, but That's just me. And then back with Zephyr, she wakes up, she's handcuffed to a bed, and then Heather, the other girl from earlier, is handcuffed to another bed beside her. And she starts like screaming for help, but we zoom out of the boat and they're just in the middle of the ocean, so no one's going to hear her. She can scream all she wants. There's nobody that's going to hear her. Because remember, on the ocean, no one can hear you scream when you're cuffed to a bed in a locked room on a big ship. And then, anyways, Tucker can hear them as he eats, but he just seems okay with it. It's like, yeah, it's just like background noise to him, because he's a serial killer. And then Zephyr immediately starts looking for something to pick the lock. And she notices that there's like some names scratched into the wall. And she sort of starts to realize, like, okay, like this isn't his first time doing this. Like he's done this before. And so she just continues to try to find a way out. And she asks Heather if anyone would come looking for her. But Heather says, like, no, there's not going to be anyone who's looking for me. Nobody really knows where I am. Stupid. If you're going on vacation, tell people where you are and what you're doing for situations like this. And I don't remember. I know Greg played a Canadian guy, and I don't remember if Heather is supposed to be Australian, but like if you're going to a foreign country, tell people what you're fucking doing because of reasons like this. Now, it might be far-fetched that, like, yeah, someone's feeding people to sharks and whatnot, but there are people that just kidnap tourists and whatnot. So, yeah, that's your little fucking PSA for the day. Tell people where you're going. Don't be stupid. And then Heather asks her the same question, but Zephyr is like, yeah, no, it's more or less the same. But then we see Moses driving, and he sees Zephyr's van being towed. So he goes to the police station to try and report her missing. But the cops are like, you know how these transient types are. They just leave and disappear. I'm like, okay, yes, but like, why would she just leave her van? And Moses tries to make this point. It's like, yeah, she lives in the van. Like, she wouldn't just leave it unless something went wrong. And then he tries to like give more information to the cops, but he really only knows her first name. Like, he doesn't know anything else. So the cops are like, oh, yeah, okay, I'm sure this is real. So, yeah, I mean, the cops are written perfectly accurately because they're fucking useless. Back on the ship, Heather starts having a breakdown, saying she's never going to see anyone ever again, and how she had a fight with her mom before she left. And then they talk about how Heather should be like planning her own life and not her mother and whatnot. And then Heather asks like why Zephyr is there in Australia, because I'm pretty sure Zephyr is playing or is an American, I'm guessing. And then basically, Zephyr was in foster homes. She went to juvie a bunch, and she wanted to get as far away from that life as possible. So she ended up in Australia. Long story short. And then Heather asks, like, for a joke, like, yeah, tell me a joke, something to keep my mind off something. I'm like, do we have time for this? I don't know, but she does anyways. And so Zephyr says, what do you call the useless piece of skin attached to a penis? A man. And they laugh and laugh. And I mean, okay, I get it. It's kind of true, especially in this situation. But then Zephyr realizes Heather has an underwire in her bra. So she asks her to take her bra off, and she pulls the wire out. And then she starts to pick at the lock. But then Tucker comes into the room with food and water for them. So she hides it very quickly. Heather drinks the water but declines the food. And then before he can ask her about her missing bra, he's like, hey, what's going on here? Zephyr gets his attention. She chugs the water down. So Tucker sits next to Zephyr on the bed and says, like, she's trying to be hard and tough and whatnot. But he tries to like scare her a bit more. And honestly, again, Jai Courtney, so good here. Like, I fear he may actually be a serial killer just because of how well and creepy he played this part. It's like, is he just playing himself? I really don't know. But after he leaves, Zephyr starts trying to pick the lock again, but then her and Heather start getting sleepy because obviously they've been drugged. So Tucker comes back in, he sees the wire on the floor, and he smiles and he says, oh, like, yeah, you've got fire in you. I like someone with fire. Makes for a better show. Ugh, what a creepy fuck. And then after that, Zephyr wakes up topside on the boat, and Tucker turns the lights on, lighting the boat in the darkness. He chugs a beer and has an old VHS camera pointed at the water. Heather is tied up in a harness behind him. He points outward and says most people think of God as like out there or up there in the sky or whatever, but he's not. He's down deep in the ocean. Yeah, so Tucker is completely fucking insane. And then he says he's noticed her on her board before and how it seems like a spiritual experience for her. And he feels like the same way about his work. Like this is his true calling. And then he goes to Heather and he cuts a piece of her hair off as she wakes up. He uncuffs her hands, but she's still attached to a line in a harness. And then he starts describing the hierarchy of animals and like sharks don't like the taste of people, and it's often the case of mistaken identity and blah, blah, blah. So I do like this part where they're not portraying the sharks as like just mindless killing machines. Because I mean, this movie does take it into a more realistic realm of things, which is why I think it makes for a better shark movie, even though it's not. We'll get more into that at the end here, but yeah, I just really like that part where it's not just like, yeah, I'm going to feed you to sharks because they'll just eat anything. He's like, no, it's often mistaken identity. But obviously he puts people in the water, he cuts them, makes them thrash around, so like the sharks will attack either way. Even if they don't end up eating them completely, they still get attacked and fucking die. But then he also kind of floats this theory of like sharks may also be associating boats with food because of chumming the water and whatnot. So I think like what he's saying is like that he's training sharks to eat people. Like that's kind of what he's doing, and that's how he's getting away with it. Whereas like 9 times out of 10, like the sharks won't attack people unless it's a case of mistaken identity, but he's sort of training them to like eat people and whatnot. Which, like, you could have taken that idea and turned it into, like, a more completely ridiculous movie, but the fact that it's, like, a little bit more grounded and, like, this is just, like, all, like, his kind of thinking and whatnot, it's just really cool. Very well done. But then eventually he lowers Heather into the chum-filled water, and she's attacked as he films. The attacks stop, she bleeds out, and dies right as he's watching her through the lens, and then he turns the camera to Zephyr and taunts her a bit. Then we go back in the room, and Zephyr scratches Heather's name into the wall. And then Tucker is up in the galley just drinking shirtless in a bathrobe and in his underwear dancing around like a real fucking Buffalo Bill motherfucker. And we can see like more of the scars on his body from the shark attacks and whatnot, which is pretty cool. But then Zephyr uncovers more names scratched into the wall. Again, just realizing even further, like just how many times and how often he's done this. And then we go back to Tucker right after this, and we see like Heather's clipped hair, and he's making it into like a fishing lure. And then he attaches it to the VHS tape with her name on it, and he places it on the shelf. And now we can see like on his shelf, like just how many times he's done this. It's kind of like Creep or the Creep tapes, the show on Shudder based on the movies. It's kind of the same thing where he films all of his attacks, then he keeps like all the tapes. He has a whole collection. Granted, in this movie, his collection's not as big as in Creep or Creep tapes because it's a little bit more outlandish in that movie and show. It works for that, but yeah, but he's done this a lot. Like he's done this quite a few times. Like he's a psycho fucking serial killer. And then he busts out a fresh VHS tape and he labels it with Zephyr's name on it. And with all of this as well, there's never really a moment that Zephyr isn't trying to escape. When she is like able-bodied and like not drugged, she's trying to pick the lock, she's trying to yank the cuffs off. Like that's her throughout the entire movie. Like she is always trying to survive and she never gives up. That's what I really liked about her and like this final girl thing she has going on, because she just does not quit. She's never like she is, in distress because she's been kidnapped, but like she's not like the typical damsel in distress, which I really liked. I thought that was really well done. And then we follow Moses for a bit, and he's surfing the area that he told Zephyr about, and he finds her bored and looks around, doesn't really find much else. We go back to Tucker, and he returns to Zephyr with food, and he says, like, don't worry, the joke's only funny once, meaning that he didn't drug it again. But she kicks the food tray right out of his hand, and then he starts talking about, like, what happens when you take a shark out of the ecosystem and how they keep order. And he basically thinks of himself as a shark. Like, him killing these women is somehow keeping the ecosystem in balance. But Zephyr calls him out and says he's just a coward who kills women because his mommy didn't love him enough. And he just gives like this little look in his face where we know that she has like just fucking hit something inside of him that's like probably fairly accurate. Like this has something to do with his background and his mother, probably just because of that look that he gives and the fact that he's killing women. We don't get a whole lot more background on him. Like it's mostly just like these subtle nods through like conversation and whatnot. But like just that look he gives, we're like, okay, we know he is crazy because of some shitty past that he had or whatever. And that's all we really need to know. We don't really need to go too much further into why he's doing this. We get a little bit of a hint and then we move on from it. It's fucking perfect. It's really good writing, and in the way that it's like showing us and not necessarily telling us, which I really liked. And he doesn't really respond to that. Like, he doesn't really give her any fuel for this, but he basically looks down at this plastic bucket that's in the room and he says, like, oh, I noticed you haven't used the facilities. You know, you should probably do something about that before, things get too weird and messy. And then he just leaves the room. And so she looks at the bucket and she breaks the plastic handle off of it, basically turning it into a shiv. And then Tucker is back upstairs. He's rewatching the tape from last night, and then he prepares more fucking roofie cocktails for Zephyr. He sneaks into the room, and right as he's about to inject her, she stabs him with the shiv, and he passes out. She grabs his keys, uncuffs herself. She tries to reach into his pocket, but he wakes up, and he starts chasing her around the boat. He manages to stab her with drugs. She makes it to the bridge and starts trying to radio for help, but there's no response, and then the drugs start kicking in. She gets to the deck and she tries to wave down a nearby party boat, but with no luck. Tucker arrives on deck and she grabs his camera and he starts freaking out. So she throws it into the water and then throws herself into the water, and she tries to swim for the boat, but she passes out before she can make it. So Tucker fishes her out of the water with like one of those like poles with like a hook on the end of it or whatever, and returns her to the boat. And we go back with Moses, and he's standing on the beach watching police search the water, but he returns to his car when he has a thought. So he opens up an app called Wave Watch, and basically it's using like traffic cameras and whatnot that are pointed at the ocean. And so he finds the cameras in that spot, and he notices like Zephyr's van, but then he notices Tucker's truck driving away shortly afterwards, and he sees the logo of his company on the side of it. So then we see Tucker returning to port, and then after dismissing his neighbor, his neighbor was like, "Yeah, I got some clients for you. How about you give me a cut, and because I give you their names and blah blah blah." But he basically like kind of brushes them off because like one, Tucker's just been stabbed, but he's also got to go replace his VHS camera. So he goes to a flea market or thrift store or something, and he's like anxiously searching for a camera, but then he eventually does find another VHS camera. So he tries to drive back fast back to the boat, but he's like in a traffic jam, and then he spots a young woman walking by herself, and he gets like tunnel vision for a bit, like he wants to go and attack her and kill her, but then he kind of snaps out of it because he's like, yeah, I can't just like do this in the middle of the street, probably. But then we see Moses, and he drives to the boat. He goes on to the boat. There's nobody there, so he starts knocking on the doors. Obviously, no one answers. But then he puts his ear down on the deck of the boat, and he can hear Zephyr down below. So he grabs a hook. He finds her in the room. He rips the tape off her mouth, and she tells him like to find a paperclip or something that she can pick the lock with, and to call the cops. So again, like she's always just thinking, she's like, hey, I need out of these cuffs. You need to call the police to like get this motherfucker dealt with. So we need to do those two things right now. Like no fucking dilly-dallying. Like let's just get fucking to it. So as he's dialing, he runs upstairs, but then Tucker tackles him before he can tell the cops anything. So like the phone call's gone through, but he hasn't managed to actually say anything. And then Tucker basically like smashes the phone or whatever. But then he ends up taking the hook and stabbing Moses in the back. Moses then swings the bag of VHS tapes and camera, and then he starts trying to choke Tucker out. But then the neighbor knocks Moses out over the head, and he's like, oh, mate, what's going on around here? I am so sorry for that terrible attempt at an Australian accent. Honestly, though, halfway through the episode, I'm surprised I haven't done it more. I'm a little bit proud of myself. But yeah, the neighbor comes on and he's like, yeah, what's going on here? And then he can hear Zephyr down below yelling for help. And he's like, yo, what's going on here? But then he turns around and then Tucker stabs him in the head with the hook. And so the neighbor's dead. His dog is there too, and the dog is barking at Tucker. So then Tucker just starts barking back at the dog, and the dog gets scared and then runs off. So the dog is fine. His owner is dead, but the dog is alive and fine. So that's all we really care about. It's just unfortunate that the neighbor was like trying to save Tucker when Tucker's actually the bad guy and he doesn't realize it till like the absolute last second. So I mean, that kind of sucks. He obviously like had no idea what Tucker was doing, which is a little surprising because I mean, you would think at one point he would have to see Tucker taking people out on the boat and then not coming back with them, but maybe Tucker's just really good and it's like, oh yeah, no, I just dropped them off somewhere else. Maybe, who knows? But yeah, unfortunate for the neighbor, but like I said, the dog is fine. That's all we really care about. Tucker then starts looking at maps and he decides to take them to Hangman's Shoal. And now Zephyr and Moses are locked in the room. Moses apologizes for fucking up the rescue and he reveals that he didn't get to tell the cops where they were. And so there's just a period of silence. And then Moses asks, like, why she left that morning. So she lies and says, like, oh, she's better off alone. And he calls bullshit because they both felt something. Yes, I believe the feeling was his penis inside of her vagina. Don't mistake it for love. But yeah, they have a heartfelt convo until Tucker comes in and says he's adding a matinee to the show. So they go back up on deck. It's still daytime. Moses is hooked up in the harness while the dead neighbor lays bloodied on the deck. And then Zephyr tries to tell Tucker that Moses is rich and they won't stop looking for him if he goes missing. But Tucker just like continues on, like he doesn't care. And so he raises Moses above the water. The shark starts circling below him. And Zephyr then tries to switch places with Moses, but Tucker lowers Moses into the water even more. He's just not having any of it today. But Zephyr tells Moses to stay still and not thrash around. And then Tucker points out the shark swimming around Moses as a bull shark, and then he gets very excited. He's like, yeah, they're like very aggressive and whatever. But as Moses stays still, the shark loses interest and then just swims away. And I'm like, yeah, I feel like this is like actually fairly accurate. So again, Zephyr being smart, movie being smart, makes Steve happy. But then Tucker brings him back on board, stabs him in the stomach and says, that should ring the dinner bell, and then hovers him above the sharks again as he bleeds out into the water. Tucker is about to lower him when he notices a helicopter flying around. And so he rushes them back inside, returns them to the locked room with Moses still bleeding out. And then Tucker watches the helicopter, whispering for it to like keep going. And then down below again, Zephyr still trying to escape, and she's trying to pull her hand out of the cuffs as Moses passes out on the other bed. Zephyr then breaks her thumb, but she hears Tucker, so she hides her pain as he comes in. And he's got like food, and he tries to tell her Moses wasn't right for her. He's too soft and she's hard, like he is. I'm like, whoa, dude, too much info. And how they're both solitary creatures, just like the sharks. They fend for themselves. He leaves the food and says tonight's show is going to be one for the ages. Zephyr tries to slip out of the cuffs after he leaves the room, but she has no luck. So she looks at Moses and says it's probably a good thing you're passed out for this. And she bites her thumb off. Most badass final girl shit I have seen in a long time. Let's fucking go. I was turned on and grossed out at the same time at this. Like, it was so badass, but also so gross. Like, she just bites her thumb right off. Amazing. So a bit later, Tucker returns to the room and he moves the sheets off her bed where she's just left her thumb there. She appears from behind the door and then locks him in there. She doesn't try to fight him. She's like, no, just locking him right in place. But he takes out like a multi-tool or a pocket knife from his pocket and he starts like unscrewing a vent or something like that. Either way, he escapes and shuts down the power to the boat just as she's trying to drive off. He tries to sneak up on her, but she shoots a flare at him and then runs from him. She climbs through a skylight in the kitchen or something, but he manages to pull her down. They fight in the kitchen, and she smacks him with a frying pan. And then he stabs his own hand, and then he pulls the knife out. He gets topside and shines a spotlight out on the water. So she, when she got away, she just jumped into the water, and she's just swimming for like this nearby. I don't know if it's the main shore or if it's just an island or whatever, But he aims a rifle, can't get a shot. So then he's in a dinghy driving towards her. She manages to reach shore, and there's lights and beach beds around, and we can kind of hear people talking, but there's nobody actually nearby, like on the beach, and we don't even see them at any point. But again, they're not too far away because we can hear the music and people talking. Like, she was so close, but Tucker chokes her out and then manages to bring her back to the boat. Now he has Moses tied up in the fishing chair, and Zephyr is the one hanging above the water in the harness. And he says some shit to Moses, then splashes Zephyr with water to wake her up. And then he asks, like, why most fishermen go after marlin. And he's like, because of the fight that they have. Like, they love the fight. And like the fisherman loves a good fight, but once a hook is in, the game is basically over. It's life or death for the fish, but for the fisherman, it's all just fun. So basically, he's like, yeah, you've got the hook in you. I'm the fisherman. You're screwed. I win. I'm paraphrasing a bit because you should just watch this movie for yourself to see his performance. There's no way I could do it any fucking justice. But as he talks, there's a big shark swimming under Zephyr, and then Tucker starts lowering her in, and he starts filming. As the shark swims for her, she swats it with her foot and redirects it. And I think that they've said at this point, like, it's a great white. I think the probably because that's like, oh yeah, we got to get up to the big shark, which is the great white. So that's what she's fighting off right now. Tucker then stabs at the shark with a pole, but the shark grabs it and takes it, and then Zephyr manages to grab it for her own defense. The shark disappears, and Zephyr starts using the hook to climb up the line and get out of the water. The shark returns and swims around slowly. It goes silent, and then Tucker yells, "Boo!" And he scares Zephyr, and she falls into the water as her rope breaks, and she starts swimming underwater. She comes face to face with the shark, and she tries to cover her bloodied hand from where she bit her thumb off. And the shark heads for her, but then loses interest, and it swims by her, looks at her, and she sees it has a scar on its body. I don't really know what they were trying to go for with this, but I guess basically, like, she's not the prey that he's looking for. Now, I know in most movies when they pull this shit, I get a little upset because, well, actually, no. In other movies, because they've established the sharks as just like mindless killing machines that will just kill and maim whatever. This movie, they haven't established that. They've established a more realistic point of view for sharks. So the fact that the shark doesn't just like openly attack her when she's, not panicking a whole lot or whatever, makes a little bit more sense to me in a way. Whereas like movies like No Way Up and whatever that one with Scout Taylor Compton is, I just did it a few months ago. I can't even remember the name of it. But yeah, like the shark, they see the sharks, but then the shark's like, you know what? I think you're all right. In those movies, it does not make any fucking sense. In this movie, I had a much easier time believing in that. But anyways, Tucker looks into the water and he doesn't see anything. Zephyr manages to sneak her way back onto the boat. She grabs a spear gun, shoots Tucker, and he falls into the water. He swims back for the boat and he tries to climb on, but he's pulled under by the shark. He looks around and the shark breaches the water again with Tucker in its mouth and slams into the ocean. The last victim on his VHS tapes is himself. And then the shark swims off with Tucker. But then as it does, Zephyr is pulled into the water because the spear is still attached to Tucker with the rope attached. Moses calls out for her, but there's nothing. He's about to give up. We see further out, Zephyr surfaces with like half of Tucker's body there. But then she just returns to the boat without any issue. Very kind of like anticlimactic in a way. It's like they were building up for like one last little thing and it just didn't amount to anything. It was still like, oh no, she's in trouble, and like, oh no, she's fine. It's like, okay, whatever. It was fine. And once she gets back on the boat, she spots the party boat from a previous night. She lights up a flare, calls for help, and the boat acknowledges her and starts heading for them. She goes to Moses and he wakes up. Everyone is happy. And then a cover of CCR's Ooby Dooby plays as credits roll. That's the song that they were talking about earlier when they first met. She was like, oh, you have like Fortunate Son, like a song about, the Vietnam War and blah, blah, blah. And then you have like Ooby Dooby, which is about nothing. But then Moses was like, oh, well, actually, the song is about blah, 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 blah. And then they fucked after that. So yeah, it's an important song to them. Now I know what you're thinking, but Steve, there's not a whole lot of shark action in this movie. True. But as I've said many times about this movie in passing and on other podcasts where I've briefly mentioned it, the dangerous animals mentioned in the title aren't sharks. It's the people. People are the dangerous animals. It's like um, the most dangerous game of all is people, is humans. So, like, that's when I first saw the trailer and I first saw that title, that's what I knew that they were going for. So I was not expecting a shit ton of shark action, and there wasn't a lot, but there was enough of it to make it creepy. And it's like the sharks in this movie are just the serial killer's weapon. Like the sharks aren't necessarily the killers. Like Jai Courtney's Tucker is the killer. Or like Stuntman Mike in Death Proof, where like Stuntman Mike's weapon is his car. Like he's the killer and he's using the car as his weapon. You can't be mad at the car. You got to be mad at Stuntman Mike. It's like with this, you got to be mad at Tucker. You can't be mad at the Sharks. Just saying. But yeah, just in case it wasn't obvious, talking throughout this movie, I love this movie. The acting from all parties, from Jai Courtney to Massey Harrison, is incredible. Like, I have never been much of a Jai Courtney fan, but fuck, he nailed it in this. Massey plays one of the best final girls I've ever seen in a horror movie. She's badass. She never stops trying to escape. Like, not once does she just, like, accept her fate and then is like, oh, no, this is it. Like, no, she fights and fights. I've seen some complaints in other reviews about the sharks not being realistic or there's, like, too much CGI. I saw this in theaters and barely noticed any CGI. I think because a lot of the stuff is practical, like they shoot on a boat, it looks like. Even if they don't, like maybe the locked room that they had her in was a set or whatever. But I mean, like when they're out on the ocean, like they're out on the water, like you can see the ocean around them. Granted, they could just be docked at shore, but still, like we get the feeling that they're out on the ocean. We don't feel like we're on a set or whatever. Everything felt very practical, felt very real. Clearly, some of the shark stuff is going to be CGI because one, they're not going to use real sharks. Two, you can't train sharks to do half the shit that they want them to do. So like that's just the option. And like I said, the CGI, in my opinion, is pretty well done. Like I don't really understand what people's problem with it was. Like there wasn't any point in the movie where I'm like, oh, the CGI was bad there, so it's taking me out of the movie. I don't remember thinking that once. I've seen the movie twice now, maybe 3 times, and not once have I noticed anything like that. Maybe other people are seeing something different. I can't speak for them, but as I'm looking at it, I'm like, no, this is pretty good, man. Like this is mint. I also really enjoy that they portray the sharks in a more realistic way, as I mentioned earlier. Whereas like a lot of other movies are just like, yeah, they're just dangerous killers for no reason. But yeah, no, this movie, a lot more realistic in the way they portray them. The cinematography is top notch. The acting, the CGI, it's all great. I'm giving this a 4-star rating. It's one of my favorite movies from last year. I'm pretty sure it was in my top 10 for 2025 as well. So I'm really glad I got to talk about it, watch it again. I highly recommend this movie to anyone because it's not just a great shark movie, it's just an amazing movie overall if you give it a chance. But I think that's all I have for this episode, everyone. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget that you can follow me on all the social medias: Instagram, Facebook, Blue Sky, Slasher, all at Bucket of Chum or at Bucket of Chum Podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, if you could hit that like and subscribe button, I would be very, very appreciative of that. And wherever you're listening to your podcast, if you can give a 5-star rating or a review on how I'm doing, just be honest, I would also greatly appreciate that. But for now, I'll see you guys next time for even more Bucket of Chum.